forgot to say 15 minutes. Yes? Yes, of course.
So this is a list of books.
A list of books? Some wisdom stuff.
Implicit and explicit.
Chris and Gareth Sparham, yep. Dhammic philosophy, introduction to Tupten Jumpa. That's the one. That's very good. Logic and epistemology. John Donne. Yes. Roger Jackson. That's the one you want to go for. Anne Klein. Very good. She's great. Very good. It's a good list. You start with those. Very good. Yeah.
I have another question.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about applying emptiness in strong affliction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I want to know how we can apply emptiness in lust, other than
Other than attachment. Other than attachment, as we did yesterday, right? But more lust
specifically.
For another person.
Generally, feeling a lust, generally operating from that place.
So it's extreme desire, extreme attachment. It's like an extreme aversion of those.
And without ugliness, if we can take it, is there any other?
Right, without ugliness. Lust without ugliness, just emptiness. All right, let's see. Yeah, right now it doesn't fit exactly, but please remind me again. Yes, it's definitely important. Okay. All right. Shall we wait a minute longer? Yes?
To give you a reminder from the question about energy and mind, whenever you have...
Yes. He has a similar question, which relates, well, it's at least related to the topic I'll talk about. I want to talk about on the last day, if that's okay. Yeah, it's more on Tantra, it's more related to Tantra, and we need to talk a little bit about that. Yes?
Can you please just continue about patience of three types? You mentioned only one type.
Oh, yes. Patience with suffering, being able to bear suffering, patience to work for the benefit of all sentient beings, and patience, of course, when being harmed by someone. Yeah, when someone harms us. So those are the three types. It's maybe formulated slightly differently, but yeah, it's usually patience with another person who harms us, patience with suffering in general, with undergoing hardship, and of course patience working for the benefit of all sentient beings, or undergoing the hardship of working for the benefit of all sentient beings. So patience, the first patience, is what we associate with patience, but our anger is not always directed at other people, it's also directed at suffering, at situations we don't like. And of course then we may also feel frustrated, taking it further towards benefiting all sentient beings. So to counteract that kind of feeling of frustration, it may not be called anger, it's more like a feeling of being upset or frustrated. Does that make sense? Okay. Should we go on with the text? Okay. Now these are the 12 sense sources, as they're called. So the sense faculties, the 6 sense faculties, as well as the 6 objects. That is one way of understanding how we experience samsara, how we experience suffering. Samsara, of course, consisting of different types of suffering. Even the happy experiences, even the pleasant experiences are said to be a form of suffering. But there's another way of talking about them from the point of view of the 18 constituents, or 18 elements, as they're sometimes called. 18 constituents are the 12 you had before. So added to them added to these 12, you also add the consciousnesses that they give rise to. Okay? So one way is to talk of the 12 sense sources. The 12 sense sources are the sense powers, as they're sometimes called, or the sense faculties, and their objects. And then you add to these 12, you add the 6 consciousnesses, and they are the results. They are the results of the 6 sense faculties and the 6 objects. On the basis of those, the 6 consciousnesses arise. I'll say it again. You have, first of all, a way to just roughly, so the 6 sense sources, the 12 sense sources, the 12 sense sources, discussing them is a coarser way to describe how we experience samsara. By just mentioning the sense faculties, the 6 sense faculties associated with the mind. So what do you need in order to now experience anything, whether sense object or any other object, and the objects. Those are called the 12 sense sources. And then you can also add the results of what they give rise to, which are the 6 types of consciousnesses. So taking the first 12 and adding 6 more, the 6 consciousnesses, you end up with 18. So what that shows you is that you, of course, need an object. Always need an object. Every mind has a content, has an object. So the object, what is the mind dependent on? On these objects that appear to it, that it can do anything with, know it, think about it, and so forth. Secondly, what it also needs is a previous moment in the form of a sense faculty, a sense power. So for the sense consciousnesses, the previous moment is a physical object, and for the mental consciousness, it's just a former moment of consciousness. Does that make sense?
Last part.
Pardon?
Can you repeat last part?
Yes, I'll repeat the last part. Okay. So when you have these 5 consciousnesses, they don't just pop up without a cause. They don't just manifest without a cause. They need a cause, and they need an object. So the fact that they need an object is indicated by the 6 objects that are part of the 18 constituents. So visual form, sound, smell, taste, tangible objects, and just any phenomenon. So every mind always needs an object, and these are mentioned in the form of the list of these 6. So what are the specific objects every mind can perceive? They're specific objects. Secondly, it needs something that precedes it. I already mentioned a former moment of consciousness, but that is not mentioned as part of the 18 constituents. It's kind of implied by that, if you like. But what is mentioned as a cause here, most specifically, is a former moment of either a sense faculty, a sense like an eye sense power, ear sense power, so forth, or in the case of a mental consciousness, a former moment of consciousness. And in fact, these objects of the sense consciousnesses, they're also a cause. They're also a cause of a sense consciousness. So in the case of the sense faculties, eye sense power, ear sense power, all the way up to mental sense power, they're definitely a cause. When it comes to the objects, the 5 sense objects are always a cause of a sense object, whereas in the case of the mental consciousness, any object, it doesn't have to precede the mind. You can think of an object that lies in the future. You can think of an object that exists at the same time as that mental consciousness arises. And you can think of an object that lies in the past. So the mental consciousness is not restricted to the object existing in close proximity, in relatively close proximity, and is also not restricted to the object existing in terms of temporal proximity, that is, existed a moment earlier. Our sense consciousnesses, they require exactly that. A sense object needs to be in relative close proximity. Of course, for taste, that means in your mouth. For smell, in your nose. I mean, the molecules that your nose smells. In the case of sound, even sound, it's a pressure wave that needs to enter your ears and lead to the vibration of the eardrum. Tangible objects, very close proximity, warmth, need to touch your skin, and smoothness, roughness, all those need to. The only exception is the visual form. That can be as far away as the moon, right? So you perceive, of course, the moon not in its fullest size. There's sometimes a debate. Do you see the moon? Because the moon is big and you just see a small moon. Okay, but you can debate that. I mean, I see Manuela over there. She looks very small because she's far away. Am I not seeing Manuela because she's much taller than she appears to me? So not all aspects appear to me the way they exist, but the defining characteristics I can perceive. Okay. So, having said that, therefore, 5 sense objects, they need to precede the sense consciousnesses. For the mental object, no, doesn't need to precede it. And for the sense faculties, the 6 sense faculties, they always need to precede them, the consciousnesses. So what are the 5 sense faculties for the sense consciousnesses? Eye sense faculty, ear sense faculty, nose sense faculty, and so forth. What is the sense faculty of the mental consciousness? Former moment of mental consciousness, right? Former moment of mental consciousness. Yeah, okay. And of course, in order to perceive a sense object, they also depend on the sense object first perceiving it, right? We cannot know a mental object unless we cannot know a sense object with a mental consciousness unless we've known it with a sense consciousness before. Which is why, of course, a person who's born blind, their mental consciousness won't be able to think of colors. I mean, they may have some idea of what a color is, but whether that's an actual color, probably not. Okay? So does that make sense? Okay. And that is expressed here. These 18 constituents, there's no I element and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. That is a Tibetan way of really shortening it, all the way from here to here. So it includes the previous ones, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, plus no visual form. And then it just adds the other 6. So there's no I element, so on. So I element here means actually there is no, well, includes in the sense, no. I element here, anything to do with the I. So I element here means I sense power, visual object, and I consciousness, right? There is no saying, of course, it doesn't exist inherently, but indicated here that it exists conventionally. So I element, there are 3 I elements. Object of the eye consciousness, sense faculty, and eye consciousness itself, those 3. And then you have the 3 ear elements, okay? Again, ear sense faculty, ear sound, and ear consciousness. So 3, 6 times for the 6 consciousnesses, 18. So that's what's expressed here in the 18 elements. So the 12 sense, you know from the previous paragraph that describes the 12 sense faculties, or the sense sources, sorry, the 12 sense sources, you know exactly what the other 18 are. What the 18 are, plus the 6 consciousnesses. Okay? It's more complicated to explain it. It's not really difficult to understand. And this is a very Buddhist way, based on the Abhidharma literature, for instance, which is described as phenomenology, different phenomena, so dividing them up. And basically, it's a very popular way of understanding how do we perceive something and how do we therefore experience samsara? Okay, how do we experience samsara and its dissatisfactory nature? Well, through these 18 constituents. Okay, so not that difficult. Then the next point, and that is difficult, the 12 links. Oh, before I move to that, of course, it's saying none of those exist inherently. They're merely labeled, of course. Sense faculty. It's just made of atoms and molecules and so forth. But on the basis of the potential that it has, or on the basis of what it gives rise to, we call it sense faculty. A visual object is only a visual object as long as there's something to perceive it. If there were no eye consciousness to see it, it wouldn't be a visual object. So it becomes a visual object, color for instance, right? Which of course we now know that it's just light waves of different length that appear to us, or the interplay, the interaction between these light waves and our retina plus our brain, that leads to the perception of, for instance, blue or red and so forth, right? So it needs all these factors, and they're labeled on the basis of these factors, and then label object. I label sense faculty and an object, and the mind that experiences blue, which is not over there. Blue is not over there. It's those light waves hitting the retina as a cause, the brain doing what the brain does, and as a result of that, the eye consciousness arising, right? And that experiencing, this eye consciousness experiencing the color blue, for instance, we call it that in relation to its causes, in relation to its object, the moments in time, that all taken together experience a certain color. On the basis of those that experiencing entity, we label eye consciousness. Does that make sense? So when you take it apart into its different parts, basically, temporal or spatial. Well, in the case of eye consciousness, there's no spatial parts, but its characteristics, its function, etc. We come to see it's merely labeled on the basis of that. None of these parts are the eye consciousness. The appearance of the color blue is not the eye consciousness, but it's part of it. And on that basis, we label. Does that make sense? And why do we go through these? Why do we go through these? Well, they indicate the conventional object. We understand, we learn what they refer to. And once we understand the conventional object, we know which parts and characteristics it is made of. We take it apart, look at these parts that are not itself, and recognize it's merely labeled on that basis. It doesn't exist in and of itself as this, that, and the other. Does that make sense? It kind of describes this process. Based on understanding the conventional, you're reminded it doesn't exist inherently. You take it apart, you don't find it, and come to the conclusion, yes, it exists in dependence, but not inherently, which is another way of saying independently. Make sense? Yes. So here, that's the path of meditation. This belongs to the path of meditation because now instead of introducing a new type of emptiness, a new object to be negated, no, good old object, same old object that we used right from the beginning, but more objects are now taken. So it's form and sound and all these objects that we didn't consider earlier on. So all the objects that are part of our existence, basically. So first of all, how do we experience samsara? On that basis. The next objects now that are first indicated on a conventional level and then also denied on an ultimate level are those objects that are responsible for us, or that show how we wander in samsara, how we cycle in samsara. How do we cycle in samsara? I wished I had this. Years ago I did this drawing, I did like a chart. And later on I saw variations of this chart, different variations, and I always forgot to download it or whatever. I mean, previously I just drew it by hand. Which is like, you have the, who's not familiar with the 12 links? Oh, okay, all right, okay. So the 12 links if you visualize those 12 links like in a circle, you visualize a circle, the first one in the top, no, it's not the Wheel of Life. We don't have the Wheel of Life here. Oh, there it is. Oh, yes, there it is. Oh, my God. Yes, that's true. But again, you can't see it from afar. You see ignorance in the top, but only if you know ignorance is at the top. Like a blind person is here. Anyway, so you go all the way through. Now visualize the second link, which is 1 o'clock. First link is 12 o'clock. Second link, 1 o'clock. Third link, pretty easy. Okay, you get it, right? 2 o'clock, and so forth. So, what I want you to visualize, now you're drawing your own chart in your mind. You're drawing your own mind. So just as you have the numbers, the digits on a clock, visualize these 12. Starting with 12 o'clock, ignorance. 1 o'clock, compositional karma, or I'll call it here something different, throwing karma, which is what it is. The karma that throws us in a certain existence. Okay? The third link is the consciousness on which this karma is now stored in the form of an imprint. Okay? Now, everything that follows, right next to it, it has a little karmic seed, which is that karmic seed that was left during the second link. Am I making sense? It's all about that. We're following now that karmic seed. We're following that. So visualize you have this clock with all the links, and there's always this karmic seed following all the way through up to 5 and 6 o'clock. Attachment and grasping, or craving and grasping, right? No, wait, there are 6 and 7 o'clock. 6 and 7 o'clock. At 6 and 7 o'clock, you have craving and grasping. No, but they're links, 7 and 8, but in the clock, you need to go -1 because you start with 12 o'clock, right? Okay. All right, can you get that picture of all of those? I'll explain them one after the other, but if you have already a sense, I have a mental disease, actually, a brain damage, called synesthesia. Are you familiar with synesthesia? I never even knew I had it. I thought everyone has it. It's associated with autism, actually. I'm not sure I have autism. But it's like everything, that's why it's easy for me, the 12 links. Anything that is explained to me. So for instance, 1 year always appears to me in the form of a circle. With January being 6 o'clock. No, that's December. 6 o'clock is December. January is 7 o'clock. Always. And what's funniest? Every letter has a color. Every letter has a color. Every name has a color. You have synesthesia. Okay, you've got it. So many people have it, and it doesn't disturb. Extreme versions are when you hear a song, it tastes strawberry or something. I don't have that. Where the senses are a little bit mixed up. So in my case, it's like, Wednesday is blue. Wednesdays are blue. Don't ask me why. Wednesdays are blue. Mondays are red, etc. Anyway, great. There's a picture. So anyway, this is why the 12 links are always arranged in that way. And I think along these lines. And in that situation, it helps me. I mean, it's silly. This doesn't serve any purpose, all the other the colors and stuff. But I remember with the Emory students, when I used to teach them, I said, as the number 2 is yellow. As the number 2 is yellow. And they were like, what? I said, isn't your 2 yellow? Is your 2 yellow as well? Oh, that's interesting. You see, it's often similar. When you have this condition, it's similar. My sister has it as well, but without the colors. Anyway, and then one person knew about it and did this test on me. And if the colors remain the same, then you have synesthesia. And she did it after a few months, and they were the same. Interesting, we have the same colors. And there's actually a book by an autistic British boy, and he says, on a blue Wednesday. Right? Because he has it very strongly, synesthesia. Anyway, okay, let's look at this. Again, you don't see anything, whether you look at this or look at that. But 12 o'clock. Now, here's not exactly at 12. On this drawing it is. It's a little bit, it's 12:30. But I'm not going to confuse you, so I'm going to say 12. Ignorance at 12. So that shows us it's the root misperception. That is the root misperception. And that is responsible for us being in samsara. What does it give, what does it give rise to? Not mentioned as in the links is, of course, self-centeredness, afflictions, but that's not mentioned in those links, it's just implied. So what else does it give rise to? Here, in particular, what are we interested in when we look at the 12 links? We're mainly interested in knowing how ignorance is responsible for creating a karma that throws us in a certain rebirth. Okay? These 12 links are not about what family are you born in, what are your experiences on a daily basis. No, they are strictly only concerned with what happens when you accumulate a karma in this lifetime to be reborn. Let's take me, okay? I accumulated the karma to be reborn as a cow. But I accumulate this karma in this life, and then I follow that karmic imprint. In my next life, I'll be reborn as a human. But the cow karma, the animal karma, is still there. And how can that ripen, even though it was created in this life, and in my next life I was born a human being, how can that ripen in the next, after my next life? So taking 3 lives, the present life is life number 1. The next life is life number 2. And now I'm following this karmic imprint. Why does that ripen only in the future? How can that ripen in a future life? That's what I'm interested in. Of course, it can ripen immediately after I die. I create it in this life, and it can ripen in my next life. I create a cow karma in this life, and as I die, this ripens. This can also be depicted by the 12 links, but then the order, the traditional order, is slightly different. It's easier understood, but why not take the more difficult version? The more difficult version is 3 lives. It's more difficult because what you're doing is you're following that seed. You're following that seed. So you've accumulated the karma. The karma, first of all, the karma is an action, a powerful action, because only powerful actions, virtues or non-virtues, neutral actions are never powerful. Virtues or non-virtues, a karma that has the power to now throw you into a new existence. In my case, existence as an animal, as a cow, as an animal. So it throws me into that existence. And what happens after the action is completed? Something is left on the mind, which is described as residue or imprint, right? So we just from the point of view of what it gives rise to, we label it imprint. Okay? Now, visualize it in the form of a dot, since it's a visual image in the first place. From 1 o'clock onwards, that second link, of course induced by ignorance, the root misperception, now you have karma. You've accumulated the karma. I have accumulated the karma. So look at me. It's it's me. It's me. So my ignorance in this life accumulated, and it accumulates karmas all the time, but we're just following one. We don't want to get too confused. There are other karmas running parallel, but we're only, to understand the process, we focus on that one karma. I accumulated the karma to be reborn now as a cow, as an animal, and let's be more specific about it, as a cow. So, karma, the action, the volitional action takes place at 1 o'clock. At 2 o'clock, the action is completed, I'm doing something else, and something has been left on my consciousness. That is link number 3. Link number 3, which is at 2 o'clock. Consciousness. Consciousness that now holds this imprint. Are we clear so far? Now, 3 o'clock is 2 o'clock is divided. Gets a little bit more complicated. In 2 parts. So you have 2 and 2:30. consciousness in this life that holds this imprint. I'm just visualizing. Let's say at the age of 30, I accumulated the karma to be reborn as a cow. It was left on the consciousness at the age of 30. And if I die at the age of 80, for 50 years, this consciousness holds this imprint. For 50 years. That is the first part of the third link, which is consciousness. It's the first part. It's the causal part. It's at the time of having created it. It's called the causal, because, it's this life in which I created that, that imprint. Then I die at 2:30 as part of this link of consciousness to show consciousness goes on to the next life. The consciousness goes on to the next life. I'm a human. The cow karma hasn't ripened, but what I need to show is that the cow karma is still with the consciousness. It doesn't get lost, although I take a new rebirth, because the consciousness goes on with its imprint. In particular, the imprint I'm interested in, the cow imprint. I'm following that, not following the other ones, just that. And then I'm reborn as another human being. Yes? And in that life, the consciousness that has now been reborn is called the resultant consciousness, because it comes from the previous life. It's that result, the consciousness that comes from a previous life, still holding what? The cow karma. Still holds the cow karma. Doesn't get lost. Doesn't get lost. I wished it got lost, right? But it doesn't. It's still there. And now I develop as a human being in that life. So my consciousness has consciousness, the resultant consciousness is the consciousness that has just entered the fertilized egg. Visualize that, right? As part of the third link in your mind's eye, as part of the third link, which started from the age of 30, remember in my previous life, at the age of 30, the cow karma was left on my consciousness. That's when link number 3 started. Then for 50 years, it remained on that consciousness. That's still part of the third link, still called result causal. And then the consciousness, when I die, leaves the body, is reborn, and is now entering the fertilized egg. That is link number 3, holding the cow. Do you know what it's? So you know how long it lasts for 50 years in my previous life, holding the cow karma, and is that first moment of entering the fertilized egg. Does that make sense? So now link number 3 is done. Link number 4 starts, which is name and form. Having entered, having connected with a fertilized egg, that fertilized egg is my first moment of body. That's my first body. Yeah, I've got a new body, a little egg, right? Now you have 5 aggregates. You have 5 aggregates. The mental, with all its mental factors and everything in its imprint, that is the mental. And you have a body. It's a body. It's not the best body, but it's one cell. But your mental consciousness and that cell have merged. This is now your new body. But fortunately, it doesn't remain that way, right? But it's the 5 aggregates. You have the 5 aggregates. And from that one cell come 2, 4, 8, and we know what happens, right? But that first moment, when your consciousness has entered the fertilized egg, that is the first moment of the 4th link, which is name and form. Name is just another way of saying mental aggregates, and form is good old form. Okay, don't lose track. We're interested, so you could actually highlight the cow karmic imprint red. It still continues on. It's showing us you can live with the cow karma, you can die with the cow karma, you can be conceived with the cow karmic imprint, right? And can take on a new life and still have the cow karmic imprint. Am I making sense? So it's just saying, okay, number 4, you've taken on the body and the life, and now life has started. So, and now you're kind of almost like fast forward, if you like, or you summarize your entire life. What is going to happen next? You make, what's the next link? Sense sources. So what do? The sense sources develop. The sense sources develop. Because you just have an egg, right? You don't yet have the capacity to make contact with the world. Okay, let me summarize. Why are we talking about this? We're saying cow karma was created, cow karma was kept for 50 years. Then this transition into a next life, cow karmic imprint, I should say. Cow karmic imprint survived that. Cow karmic imprint survived the new aggregates in the form of name and form, right? Which is link number 4. And now, while watching cow karmic imprint, while not letting go of that, now I develop into a person who can interact with the world, with my own samsaric world, by way of the sense sources developing. They're developed now. They develop now. So through all this process, this cow karmic imprint remains. I develop, my sense sources develop. And so this is the 5th link of the sense sources developing, their development. And once they're developed, all of them are ready, which happens probably in the womb, when you actually, the last one is probably the eye sense power, that's the last one that is active. So already in the womb, right? Some children have their eyes open, they can already see things. I don't think you're blind, I think you can see before you're born. Okay, so already in the womb, sense power number 5 is completed. The sense sources. So the sense sources is the time of their development. That's link number 5. Okay? So let me repeat. Link number 4 is the next life. Okay, so already next life, having a new mind and body. And then the development of the sense sources, that's link number 5. Sorry, link number 4 is having mind and body. Link number 5 is having the sense sources. Okay, showing that even with this cow karmic imprint, I can develop into a new living being, that once number 5 is completed, you have number 6. Now you can make contact. You make contact with all 5 sense consciousnesses, and the mental consciousness was there right from the beginning. You're ready to take in your new reality. Okay, all right. So every time you make contact, there's feeling. Every time you make contact, there's feeling. And feeling leads to craving and grasping. That's how a life. We live a life defined by that, right? With this cow karmic imprint, right? Let's not lose sight of that cow karmic imprint. It's still there. And I've carried it on to the next life. I had a new mind and body. My ability to take in samsara first developed, then I'm able to do it. Contact leads to feeling, leads to craving, and a stronger craving, which is grasping. That is pretty much our life, let's face it. Okay? That's my second life, and of course my other lives as well. But here we're focusing on that fact, because that's important. That's important, and it becomes clear later on how that connects to the karmic cow imprint. But it also, it shows us so many different aspects of our life. One, of course, that the cow karmic imprint remains with us at all times, but also how our life, we make contact, there's feeling, and craving and grasping arise, right? I mean, our whole life, craving this, craving that, craving well-being, craving gain, craving the whole, it's all right, okay. But now I'm interested, how my craving and my grasping have an influence on this cow karmic imprint. How does it have an influence on this? How do those interact? While I'm alive, let's say I live for 70 years in that second existence with my cow karmic imprint. While I'm alive, the cow karmic imprint lies dormant, and I'm just craving and grasping along, live my life, accumulate a lot of other karmas and so forth, never mind. Okay. But then the time of my death has arrived. Remember, I told you the cow karmic imprint is now going to ripen in the third life. Now I need to focus on it more specifically. It lay dormant. Now death has come. I'm lying dying. And I know I'm going to die. And I'm feeling unpleasant. There's a displeasure. Displeasure is there. And what am I craving now? Not chocolate. Not a new job, a new house. No. I'm feeling how my body slowly, or my mind slowly separates from my body. And I'm holding on to existence. Right? This feeling of displeasure, usually it's displeasure. We don't want to separate. As an ordinary person, I don't want to separate from my body. I'm attached to my body. This is me. I'm feeling I'm losing myself. I'm feeling this is the moment when we're dying, right? So maybe I was able to keep a virtuous mind and so forth, and that's great. But let's say, because it's a cow karma, I'm interested now, I'm kicking and screaming, no, don't take me, oh no, I don't want to die. I'm like, oh my God, I'm suffering greatly. And people do sometimes. They hold on and they suffer greatly. So displeasure, craving. I want to exist, right? I want to exist. Me, I, very strong craving, which turns into grasping. And now that karmic seed, just as an ordinary seed, starts to germinate. The grasping, the craving, especially the grasping, that strong grasping at the time of death, it now leads to the germination of that seed. It starts to ripen. And that ripening seed, okay, after the grasping leads to the ripening. The seed starts to become active. That is, remember the links, name and form, link number 4. Then the sense sources developed in the womb, number 5. Number 6, contact. I'm getting confused. 4 name and form, 5 sense sources, 6 contact, 7 feeling. Oh yeah, it's 8 and 9. Sorry, it's 8 and 9. That's right. Craving and grasping are 8 and 9. So it's 7 and 8 o'clock. Okay, so never mind the position on the clock. But the point is, so you have number 6, contact. Number 7, feeling. Number 8, craving. Number 9, grasping. Number 10, cow karma is now fully ripened. For whatever reason, of the many different karmic imprints that I've left since beginning this time, due to my mental state, maybe the last thing I saw was a cow, and I was like, I wish there was this cow and I wouldn't die, right? As just an example, I don't know whether that's the reason why that cow karma ripens. But for whatever reason, something triggers that karma. I could, of course, be a human karma. If in the first place it was a human karma, but I chose the cow karma. So the cow karma now ripens. It's fully germinated. Fully germinated. There's no going back. When it's fully germinated, there's nothing you can do about it. A moment later, you have link number 11, birth. Link number 11, birth. And how does birth end? Link number 12, aging, sickness, and death. Number 12. So you see, this process, of course, as the second life, the cow karma life, you have also name and form, and you have contact, and you have all this. But you don't know already from the previous life that all that takes place. You all know that already. So really, if you think that there's this image of these 12 links, and the cow karma, this imprint, you're following that. You're following that to understand, first of all, in your first life, when you created it, it remains with the mind for a long time. Even when the mind is reincarnated, it remains with that. And then the mind grows a body that has now the sense faculties, and when they're fully developed, there's contact, there's feeling, there's craving and grasping as we live our life. And now in feeling, craving and grasping, we're moving forward towards, we're focusing especially towards the time of death, right? You can also focus on them from the point of view of how we live our life and how they're very much part of our life. But now we're focusing, we're moving forward to the moment of death, where it's our craving and grasping that is responsible for the ripening of a karma. If we have attained liberation before that, the karma cannot ripen. If you attained liberation before that, there's no more craving and grasping. You cannot have as many cow karmic imprints and human karmic imprints and what have you. You will not be reborn. The imprints themselves are not the problem. It's our craving and grasping for existence, for this ordinary existence, the one thing we know, that triggers the ripening of the karma. So it's no one throwing us anywhere. It's not even the throwing karma that throws us in the end, although it's called throwing karma. No, it can only throw us if we have craving and grasping, right? If we have craving and grasping. So it's our craving for existence. Does that make sense? And so it is that craving for existence that triggers the karmic imprint. And then, since we followed the cow karma, well, we're born as a cow. Or as a human being, if I chose another karma. Okay. But you see how, and this shows us, of course, it could have ripened right away. The explanation would have been a different one. But it could have also, we could have also have a life in between and another in between. Between life number 2 and 3, you could have many lives. Yeah, it could ripen many, many lives in the future. It's possible. It's possible it could ripen. Which accounts for the fact that in Buddhism, death and how we die is very important. If we are not liberated yet, we're not liberated yet, which then, of course, we have a natural, peaceful death anyway. We're peaceful because we've been liberated. But if we're not liberated yet, I think that was the fastest I ever went through the 12 links, by the way. I've taught whole courses on them, but never mind. So if we're not liberated, craving and grasping will, of course, arise. Yes. And it's important that previous to those, we have a peaceful mind. Because the peaceful mind, craving and grasping happen on a level when we have very little control, when the mind grows subtler. On a coarser level, if we are peaceful, then the craving and grasping will be influenced by that peaceful mind, and it's more likely that a karma such as human karma ripens, right? Because it's a virtuous mind that then influences craving and grasping, which in themselves are not virtuous or non-virtuous. They're actually neutral. And because of the previous mind being virtuous, it can actually influence craving and grasping in such a way that a virtuous karmic imprint, celestial or human birth, that is ripened. Animal birth is considered to be a non-virtuous karma, because in general, being an animal, you have less opportunities, it's much harder. It doesn't mean that there are not animals who live a better life than a human, but that is to do with the completing karmic imprints, right? You're born as a dog, potentially have less opportunities. From that point of view, it's negative, but you can live being loved and so forth, can have a wonderful life as a dog, have a great rebirth as a result of that wonderful life, versus a human existence that is terrible, and you create as a human a lot more negativity. That's of course possible. But just from the point of view of potential and opportunities, a human or celestial life are considered to be positive or the result of virtuous karma, versus a rebirth as an animal, preta being or hell being, just because of the amount of suffering potentially that could be experienced and the lack of opportunities. Okay. Are the 12 links roughly understood? Okay. Of course, you can then go back to this picture and then they're depicted. But the drawings, you need to know, I mean, like the blind person and then the potter is like forming a karma. That's like the karma itself. Then it's left on the mind. That's like a monkey mind, and so forth. So there are different symbolisms that depict these 12 links. Okay, and we don't have time to do the whole Wheel of Life. That's a different course altogether. But just to go through the 12 links in that way. And now I have time to take a few questions before we take a break for lunch. Yes, you were first.
Yeah, I read there are like not only causes give rise to effect, but also causes give rise to causes and effects give rise to effect.
Okay. Oh, that's a very profound statement. Not only do causes give rise to effects, but causes give rise to causes and effects give rise to effects. Yes, but only because a cause gives rise to an effect, which is also a cause in itself. A cause, okay, this is the first moment, giving rise to the second moment. This is the seed that gives rise to the sprout. So this seed is a result from something else, and it gives rise to its own result. So a result gives rise to a result. But because it gives rise to this, it's also a cause. So a cause gives rise to a result. But since that result is also a cause also gives rise to a cause. In other words, the fact that this moment gives rise to that accounts for the fact that a cause gives rise to a result gives rise to a result, and a cause gives rise to a cause. Because from one perspective, this is a result of a former moment. From one perspective, this is the cause of the next moment. From one perspective, this is the result of the former moment, but from another perspective, it's also the cause of the next moment. Which is why you're absolutely right. A cause gives rise to a result gives rise to a result, a result gives rise to a result, a cause gives rise to a cause. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? Oh, thank you. I thought I totally confused you with that. Okay, great. Luca.
The question is, you said there's many, so we get propelled by the last karmic input.
Not the last.
By the
one of them
by
ripens.
The throwing karma.
There's one throwing karma that for whatever reason, and some reasons are given, never mind, ripens at the time of death when there's craving and grasping. Yes.
Is there a difference? So by what get propelled a tulku or maybe a Buddha when he reincarnates?
Oh, the process is totally different. A Buddha reincarnates controllably. You don't need all this. No craving, no grasping, no imprints. Manifestation. There's no, you see, it's our karmic imprints and this craving and grasping that propels us. What propels a Buddha is compassion and wisdom. Out of compassion and wisdom, the Buddha manifests. I mean, the thing is, it looks like just an ordinary child going through the same. The causes are different, but it has to be like an ordinary. It needs to look like an ordinary child because otherwise we can't relate to this person. It needs to look. So a Buddha, so for all I know, you could be a Buddha. You may be born to ordinary parents and an ordinary this. It seems totally ordinary. But if you want to benefit us, being ordinary is helpful. Because someone who's totally beyond me, I can identify with someone who's got the same weaknesses than I do. So I can identify with that person. If they're like so perfect, it's like, okay, they're them and I'm me and I can't do anything with them. If you manifest, and in a Buddha's case, you use different words. In Tibetan, for instance, you would say manifest, show the aspect of. So you show the aspect of taking birth as an ordinary being with ordinary parents and so forth. But actually what gave rise to that was not the karmic imprints, no longer any karmic imprints anyway. And secondly, no craving and grasping. So a total control process. You control the whole thing. What is of greatest benefit to as many people as possible.
What is the difference between a Buddha and now a reincarnated master?
There's a difference. Oh gosh, it's getting more complicated. Because a reincarnated master has still karmic imprints, okay, depending on their level. On a certain level, they still have karmic imprints, but they can control their craving and grasping. And instead of craving and grasping, it's love and prayers. Compassion, and so they lead to the germination of that imprint. And they can choose the imprint. They can choose the imprint, and the which imprint is most beneficial of the ones they've accumulated. And then it's love and compassion. Later on, it's not even the imprint. Right? It's not even that imprint. There's a different process when they take on a mental body, and it gets all confusing. We have to go into the mental body. Anyway, not going into all these details because it's so complicated, and there's not that much explanation on it anyway. But there are different levels as you progress, and at some point, especially when you've realized emptiness directly as a bodhisattva, you have the ability now to use these imprints, and on the basis of prayers and love, you replace them. There's no longer the strong, uncontrolled craving and grasping, even though craving and grasping hasn't been abandoned yet, eliminated yet, but they don't control you. You can control them. And so it's love and prayer instead. Aspiration. Prayer is just another word for aspiration. May I be born in such and such place to be of great benefit to others. So it's through this love and that aspiration that you're born in those states, and you can continue with your great work. For a Buddha, they're not even the imprints, it's just total controlled process, manifest in whichever form necessary. Because you have power over the mind, which means you have power over the subtle energies, which are also responsible for this body. So you don't have power over the energies all around you, but at least the ones that are part of your mind. Those you can control, which is why you can control how you manifest. Does that make sense? Yes. Ram, did you have, or James, one of you two? Okay, Ram, go ahead.
So in 12 links...
Oh! Last one. Let's see how quick.
I already kind of asked in the last session. So
Oh, you already asked. Can you wait until after then let's do it, because I don't want to let you go too late. So it's 1:45 now. This is 3 minutes too early. I'll see you again after lunch. Okay. Oh, discussion. I'll tell her. All right.